Maybe some of the bigger kids, if you guys want to sort of line up the edge of the stage here, so maybe none of the younger kids don't accidentally fall off or anything like that. Try not to fiddle with any of these chords. They need all that for worship. Have a seat, gather around. You can even come up to this step too if you need to. Oh yeah, there's a lot of you today. It's good to see. Still lots of room over here, guys. Well, good morning. Morning. How's everybody doing? Pretty good? Anything exciting happening in your lives? Anything cool that God's been teaching you? Any answered prayers? What happened this week? Somebody got a new sister this week. That's awesome, right? That's God's blessing. God's blessing is safe delivery, right? The Blatz family has another girl. That's quite interesting. Anything else? Anything else exciting going on? Sorry? Yeah, you did. That's right. You got a little sister not too long ago, too. That's right. Well, good morning, guys. So I'm going to take a bit of a break from the book of Acts, and I want to go over to the book of John. There's a story in there I was thinking of, and I really like this story. It'll be kind of brief, but I think we do need to be a bit brief this morning because we got a nice presentation that we're going to be listening to in a little bit. So I'm going to keep my lesson just a little bit brief. For those of you that do bring your Bibles, if you guys want to turn to John chapter 9. John chapter 9. Okay. And it starts like this. And as Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? So these disciples are wondering, is it because of sin in his life, or maybe sins that his parents have committed? Is that why he was born blind? And Jesus answered and says, Neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. I must work the works of him that sent me, while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work. So who is it that sent Jesus? God. That's right. He sent him that Father. He's saying it's not that his parents sinned, and it's not that he sinned. He says, but this man is blind so that the works of God will be made known to people. Okay, so Jesus is going to use this to teach a lot of people something very special. Verse 4, I must work, I just read that. But he says, I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work. As long as I am in the world, I am in the light of the world. So what Jesus is saying is, while I'm here, I need to be productive. There's a lot of stuff for me to do. So I must work the works of what my Father has sent me to do. Verse 6, when he had thus spoken, he spat on the ground and made clay of the spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. Kind of a weird thing to do, right? So he actually spat on the ground. He took that saliva and sort of made almost like some mud, some like muddy clay, and then he just rubs it on the guy's eyelids. That's what he does. And he said unto him, Go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is by interpretation sent. He went his way, therefore, and washed, and came seeing. So I'm not sure if maybe he was just so familiar with the area he was at that he was able to actually walk himself to the pool, or maybe some people who were close to him actually led him over to the pool, but he did exactly what Jesus said. He's walking there, he's got clay all over his eyelids like this, and he goes and he washes in this certain pool. It had to be a very specific pool that Jesus sent him to. Verse 8, the neighbors, therefore, and he said that he washed, and then immediately he said he came seeing. So it wasn't when Jesus rubbed the clay on his eyes that he received his sight, but it's after he was obedient and he listened to the word of Jesus when he went down to the pool, and that's how he received his sight. Verse 8, the neighbors, therefore, and they which before had seen him that he was blind, said, Is this not he that sat and begged? Some said, This is he. Others said, He's like him. But he said, I am he. So now these neighbors are looking at this guy like, Hey, he looks familiar. Isn't that homeless guy that's been sitting around his whole life blind and begging? And some said, Yeah, I think that's him. And the other guy said, Well, no, that can't be. He probably just looks like that guy. And then the guy says, No, I am he. I was that guy. Verse 10, Therefore said they unto him, How were thine eyes open? He answered and said, A man that is called Jesus made clay and anointed mine eyes, and said unto me, Go to the pool of Siloam and wash. And I went and washed, and I received sight. As simple as that. And people were probably thinking, that's crazy. It's like, so how are you all of a sudden, you were born blind, you're a full-grown man now. How were your eyes open? Real simple. A man named Jesus came, he put clay on my eyes, and he told me to go wash in a certain pool. I did, and now I can see again. I can't even imagine what that would like. It'd probably, the way I would see it is if I was blind my entire life, and then all of a sudden I could see, I'd probably be blind again because my eyes would be so full of tears of joy that I wouldn't even be able to see. right? Like everything would be foggy and stuff like that. It'd probably take him a little while to sort of gather himself, like, wow. Could you imagine if you would never be able to see? Everything was always dark. You could only hear. You would never get to know. You've never seen your mother's face. You've never seen beautiful flowers in fields or anything like that. You've never got to see all the beautiful things that this world has to offer. Now you're a full-grown man and you can see everything. That'd be astonishing. Wouldn't that be crazy? We can't even comprehend it. Then said they unto him, so where is he? He said, I know not. They're asking, where is Jesus? Where's the guy that healed you? They brought to the Pharisees him that aforetime was blind. And it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. So they're saying, well, where is this guy? And then they want to go bring this man over to their officials of the religion, right? The Pharisees, they were the ones who were authorized to teach the word of God, to preach in the synagogues, to pray in street corners and stuff like that, right? And so they immediately bring him over to him. And it does note here that it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. How many of you guys think that the Pharisees are going to like this news? They don't like that. And so what do you think their problem is going to be with it? Are they upset that this guy can now see, or what's the problem? Yeah, so in the Pharisees' eyes, Jesus now worked on the Sabbath day. They had so many laws, I don't even know them all, but you couldn't even go a certain amount of steps away from your home. It was very religious. Don't do any work. No work. Don't you even spit on the ground and make clay. That's too much work. Don't do that. Even if it means that this man is going to be able to see for the first time in his whole life, he's doing a good thing. But the Pharisees are going to have a problem with this. Then again, the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. And he said unto them, he put clay upon my eyes, and I washed and do see. As simple as that. They're probably thinking, that doesn't make any sense. Verse 16. Therefore said some of the Pharisees, this man is not of God, because he keepeth not the Sabbath day. Others said, how can a man that is a sinner do such miracles? And there was a division among them. So these guys are thinking, well, this guy obviously can't be from God. He's doing evil, right? He's doing work on the Sabbath, and these guys are saying, well, he did just perform a miracle, right? How can this sinner, because we think he's a sinner, right? How can he perform such miracles? And so they're divided amongst themselves. They're not quite sure what to think. They say unto the blind man again, what sayest thou of him, that he hath opened thine eyes? He said, he is a prophet. So the blind guy is saying, well, he's got to be a prophet, right? The only people in history even though this guy's blind, the only people in history he's ever heard of that's been able to do miracles like that would be prophets of God, right? So this blind guy's saying, well, he's got to be a prophet, right? But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind and received his sight until they called the parents of him that had received his sight. So these Jews, these Pharisees still don't believe his story quite right. Like maybe it's because he's saying that Jesus is a prophet, or maybe it's because it's just too simple. How could he have just put clay on his eyes and told him to go and wash his eyes out? And now all of a sudden he receives his sight. And they asked them saying, so they actually found his parents. How difficult that might have been, I don't know. Maybe some of the people knew him. They always knew who his parents were. And they said, and then they brought the parents over. And they asked them saying, is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then doth he now see? His parents answered them and said, we know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. But by what means he now seeth, we know not. Or who hath opened his eyes, we know not. He is of age, ask him. He shall speak for himself. And so these parents are saying, yep, that's definitely our son. You know, he was born blind, and we know that, but we have no idea how he's able to see. So the Pharisees didn't quite get that information. They're thinking there has to be some sort of a logical explanation for this. There has to be something a bit more descriptive as to how this guy received his sight. And his parents saying, maybe ask him. He's of age. I mean, he is a full-grown man. Can't he speak for himself? And it says in verse 22, these words spake his parents because they feared the Jews. For the Jews had agreed already that if any man did confess that he was Christ, he should be put out of the synagogue. And so there was a bit of peer pressure too. Okay, the parents were actually a little bit afraid. They didn't want to say the right thing because if the Pharisees caught wind that they believed in the power of Jesus and that they confessed that man Jesus was the Christ. Do you guys know what the Christ means? Right? That's the promised Messiah. The Pharisees didn't believe that Jesus was the Christ. Okay? And so they said that if anybody confessed that he's the Christ, then they shut you out of the church completely. That's a lot of pressure. Even if it's almost impossible to not believe the things that Jesus said, you'd still be under some pressure to keep it quiet and not confess. Because if all of a sudden sharing your faith with people, then they're like, well, then get out. You have no part in our church anymore. So that was what was going to happen to them. So they sort of feared the Jews a little bit. Verse 23, therefore said his parents, he is of age, ask him. 24, then again called they the man that was blind, and said unto him, give God the praise. We know that this man is a sinner. And so now thinking, all right, well, that was useless. We got his parents out here. We didn't get the kind of information that we wanted. And then they said to this guy, okay, go and praise God. That man that put the clay on your eyes and enabled you to see again, that man's a sinner. And it's really interesting the way this guy answers him right here. He answered and says, whether he be a sinner or no, I know not. One thing I know, that whereas I was blind, now I see. He says, I don't know if he's a sinner or not, honestly. All I do know is that I was blind and now I can see. Like that's the craziest thing ever. Again, he's lived his full life. He's a full-grown man now. He's never been able to see anything, and now he can see everything. He said, so that's all I know. Then said they to him again, what did he to thee? How opened he thine eyes? He answered them, I've already told you. I have told you already, and you did not hear. Wherefore would you hear it again? Will you also be his disciples? So he's saying, man, like I've said it 3-4 times already. There's no point in me telling you again. He's like, why don't you guys go be his disciples? Why don't you guys go ask him, essentially? He'll tell you. You'll get the information from him. And now this frustrates the Pharisees. It says, then they reviled him and they said, thou art his disciple. We're Moses' disciples. He's saying, no. We'll never be his disciples. You can trust us on that. We're Moses' disciples. We know that God spake unto Moses. As for this fellow, we know not whence he is. So he's saying, no, we don't believe in Jesus. Don't even joke about that. We're not going to be Jesus' disciples. We believe in Moses. We're Moses' disciples because it says in the law that God spoke to Moses. And that's true. That's true. But they are being willingly ignorant, right? Did they ever really give Jesus a fair chance? I think it all happened for a reason. I think it all the denial, all of the persecution against Jesus, it all happened for a reason. The man answered and said unto them, why, herein is a marvelous thing, that ye know not from whence he is, and yet he hath opened mine eyes. And so he's saying, well, this is pretty crazy. You guys have never even heard about him or where he's from, and yet he hath opened my eyes. Now we know that God heareth not sinners, but if a man be a worshipper of God and doeth his will, him he heareth. So this guy, he can't be a very intelligent man, but he knows a lot of very simple and powerful truths. He says, okay, so we know that God doesn't hear sinners. But if any man is a worshiper of God and doeth his will, him he heareth. That makes sense, right? If you're a worshiper of God and you do the things that please God, you can probably trust that God hears your prayers, right? If you want to live an obedient life to God and you're doing everything you can, you're doing your best, and you really want to be a servant of God, God will hear your prayers, right? That makes sense, right? And he says here, since the world began, was it not heard that any man opened the eyes of one that was born blind? If this man were not of God, he could do nothing. So he's saying, all of history, have we ever heard that anybody has ever opened the eyes of somebody who's blind? No. So he says, so if this man were not of God, he could do nothing. They answered and said unto him, thou wast altogether born in sins, and dost thou teach us? And they cast him out. Now they're thinking, it's like yeah, right. So these people actually think that he was born in his sin. You don't know anything. You know, your life is full of sin, for all they know. You think you can teach us? And now they're tired of him, and they cast him out. Verse 35, Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and when he had found him, he said unto them, dost thou believe on the Son of God? So this is after the fact. I don't know where the man went, but Jesus found out that he was questioned by the Pharisees about what happened, and that they cast him out, and so Jesus goes and finds him. And he says, do you believe on the Son of God? He answered and said, who is he, Lord, that I might believe on him? And Jesus said unto him, thou hast both seen him, and it is he that talketh with thee. So he doesn't directly say, I'm the Son of God, but he says, you have seen him, right? Now you can see all things. And the very same person that you're seeing is the one that's talking with you. That is the Son of God. And he said, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. And Jesus said, for judgment I have come into this world, that they which see might not see, and that they which see might be made blind. Oh, sorry, I said that wrong. For judgment I'm come into this world, that they which see not might see, and that they which see might be made blind. And some of the Pharisees which were with him heard these words and said, are we blind also? And Jesus said unto them, if ye were blind, ye should have no sin. But now ye say, we see, therefore your sin remaineth. That's kind of a strange idea, right? What does that really mean? See, sometimes sometimes we think we know what is right and what is good and the way that we need to please God. And those are the kinds of people that Jesus needs to come down and sort of break down everything that they know. Because sometimes we think when we know what we know, we don't quite understand God's love. It's too simple. It doesn't quite make sense. Wait, so you're saying that all I have to do is believe on a guy who died on the cross for me? Yes. That's it, right? And so the people who have no knowledge of him, and Jesus came there to make them see. Okay, so it's a bit of a brief message, but that's it for today. You guys can go back to your seats.